did one of these a couple of weeks ago, and it was virtual and online. And there's something that's great and wonderful about technology that lets us connect that way. It allows for actually the group that's attending this session to look a lot bigger than it does in here, because there's a handful of folks as well at home that are tuning in. So it certainly gives us, technology is a wonderful thing, but being here in person, I think, is something that we're all really excited about. And I'm glad that you chose to come out tonight to see the presentation. What I'll do is I'll start off by saying welcome, obviously, to the 2022 Candidates Information Session for Municipal and School Board Candidates in Guelph. My name is Stephen O'Brien. I'm the City Clerk here at the City of Guelph, and part of my role as a statutory officer, as part of the statutory role I have as City Clerk, is to serve as the returning officer for the local election here in Guelph, both school board and municipal. And I'm joined by 444 of my counterparts across the province, 443, I should say. And all of those municipalities have a local municipal clerk that does the same thing that we do, prepares and gets ourselves ready for the delivery of local elections. So it's something we take a great deal of pride in. It's an exciting project. And so this is just but one step, an early step on that journey that will culminate on October 24th. I'm joined by my colleague Jennifer Slater here. Jennifer Slater is our manager of elections. She's really the one that does the lion's share of the work, and her team is a big help with that. I'm also joined by Juan De Silva at the back. Juan will probably be ducking behind the monitors, but he's also the brains of the broadcast and making sure that we're sharing online as well. I'll make another introduction shortly, but I'm going to respectfully skip over Mr. Fred Dean at this point, and I'll introduce him shortly. What we've got tonight is what we feel is a really informative session for you. Lots of details about municipal elections, lots of information about local government as a whole. And again, as I said, I'll be joined, come on in, I'll be joined by Mr. Fred Dean, and I'll share some information about Fred shortly. These are really important sessions because you no doubt have many, many questions as you consider, maybe contemplate running for office. We'll certainly highlight some important information that you'll need to know as we head into the election season. We'll outline recent legislative changes and how we've worked, obviously, to adapt our services, our election services, which is just like any other service we offer at the city, to prepare for operating an election in a pandemic time. So we'll share some information in that regard. We're going to answer questions at the end of the session today. So what I'd encourage you to do, if you've got a pen and paper, jot questions down as you go. We'll save them for the end. That's a really good tool for us as we sort of navigate a hybrid meeting, because it allows folks to jump to the questions and hear those things if they so choose, as opposed to having to sort of pick it out throughout. For those of you that are joining online, and we've got a camera that's broadcasting the meeting, for those that are joining online, please submit your questions through the WebEx chat feature, and we'll have those questions relayed as well. We're going to repeat the questions for those of you that are in attendance here, so you'll hear both the questions that come in online, and we'll be repeating your questions for those individuals that are tuning in online so that they can hear your questions as well. If you have a question, again, jot it down, save it, park it for the end of the meeting. We'll be happy to go through those. Oops, there's my timer. For anyone who wasn't able to attend either session, or maybe the previous session, you want to get some information on that, you can tune in online. We're going to save both of the recordings from a couple of weeks ago and tonight. So there'll be that resource that'll be available on guelph.ca. What I'll say is, for those of you that are in attendance, we're going to take a short break after Fred's presentation. If at any time you need to use the facilities, you're more than welcome to. The doors are open, as you saw. So out into the lobby, on the left-hand side of the atrium in the lobby, you'll see the washroom facilities there. So if you need to go, please go ahead and do that. And you can find your way back in. So with that, let's jump to the next slide. I'm going to go over the agenda for tonight. In a moment, again, I'll introduce our guest more thoroughly. Following the introductions, we're going to provide some Guelph-specific information about what offices are open for election, an overview of the nomination process here in Guelph. We'll provide some key dates and information that you'll want to keep in top of mind, and we'll let you know where you can find more information following tonight and going forward. We will have, as I mentioned, an invaluable presentation from Mr. Fred Dean, who will provide insight and background on municipal government authority, personal considerations, and conflict of interest, amongst other things. And so with that, I will jump in and introduce Fred. Fred is a retired municipal lawyer and coach with extensive experience in the municipal sector and in our industry. Fred spent the majority of his career with the City of Sudbury as their city solicitor, but also worked in Brampton and Scarborough prior to that. He works exclusively in this sector, in the municipal sector, And in partnership with his business partner, Fred is a principal at Amberley Gavel Limited and has supported many municipalities as a closed meeting investigator and as an integrity commissioner. Fred is an honor roll inductee with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. He's the former chair of the question box panels, as they're called, at two of Ontario's most prestigious and foremost municipal conferences. And this is the fourth election that he has presented this workshop for potential candidates. So after I'm finished speaking, you'll get a great sense of what it means to run and consider running for municipal office. And Fred does a great job at sharing that information. Before I get to that, as I said earlier, before Fred gets up, I'll go through a little bit of information about the City of Guelph. So on the slide behind me, you'll see the offices that you can run for, the various offices. In Guelph, one mayor obviously elected. We have 6 wards in Guelph. Each ward elects 2 councillors. We've got a 13-member council as a result, okay? On the school board side, if you're considering a run for school board trustee, you can seek election in the Upper Grand District School Board, the Wellington Catholic District School Board, the Conseil scolaire de District Catholique Centre-Sud, and the Conseil scolaire Vieux-Monde. Those are the French separate and the French public school boards in Ontario. In the Upper Grand area and the Upper Grand District School Board, we elect 2 in wards 1 and 5, 2 school board trustees in wards 2, 3, and 4, and 1 trustee is actually shared between ward 6 and the township of Puslinch to the south of Guelph. 4 are elected at large at the Wellington Catholic District School Board, and there's 1 to be elected in each of the French public and French separate school boards. The first step you'll take, aside from considering a run at office and a run for elected office, is filing your nomination paper. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. Over the last 2 years, restrictions, obviously public health restrictions and public health requirements have changed quickly to ensure obviously community safety. We've obviously wanted to provide an open and flexible process through which candidates can file their nomination papers. So as we continue to move through the pandemic and hopefully out of the pandemic, we're prepared to obviously welcome candidates into City Hall, as you are here, to file their nomination papers. However, candidates will also be able to get the full package of nomination information on our website, and that digital nomination package will be available as of nomination day. We will offer remote pre-filing meetings if people prefer to limit time in person when they're filing. So that's an option available to candidates if they so choose. Starting again on May 2nd, you can find the nomination package and forms on the City of Guelph website at guelph.ca/vote. Or you can come into City Hall and attend the Service Guelph desk to get that package as well. As of 2018, there is a prescribed requirement to have 25 endorsements that need to be completed. And so in order for the endorsement form to be accurate and considered complete, the person signing must be eligible to vote in the election here in Guelph and in the area and the jurisdiction in which you're running for office as of the day that they endorse your nomination. So as of the day they find that file or sign that paperwork. It's your responsibility to ensure that those endorsing your nominations are eligible to do so. If possible, what we would recommend is finding more than 25. Sometimes those forms are filled out quickly. Sometimes it's in passing. The form isn't dated. It may not be signed. And you would hate to come in with exactly 25 to only find that one isn't a complete endorsement. And it did happen in 2018, again, as of a new requirement for 2018. It did happen in 2018 where someone had to wander out into the Market Square area in front of City Hall and find an eligible elector that would offer to endorse them. So I would suggest you find 25 to 30 individuals to endorse, to file those endorsement papers. And again, in those pre-nomination meetings, we'll be able to offer that information, and the information will be available again online. To file your nominations in finality, you'll need to book a 30-minute appointment with us to come into City Hall. This gives us the opportunity to go over some final information in the nomination package and provide important information to you as you begin and embark upon a campaign. You can book an appointment by emailing or calling the election team directly. These contacts are shared as part of the presentation, so you'll see those. And again, they are online and will be available online at guelph.ca/vote. When you do come in to file your nomination papers, you'll need to show acceptable identification that shows your name and your qualifying address within Guelph. Okay? Once you file, you'll be given access to a secure candidates portal. We have an online portal where we share information with candidates throughout the election process. So we'll share quite frankly, confidential and sensitive documents like the voters list, right? Has an incredible amount of personal information on there. You're entitled to a voters list as a candidate seeking office. And so we provide those through that portal. We also provide access to the forms that you'll need throughout your campaign period. And again, shortly after filing your nomination period or paperwork, you'll get access to that portal at that time. The next thing I want to talk about is an important policy that we're required to have as per the election legislation, and that's our use of corporate resources policy. So this policy guides how city resources, city corporate resources are to be used or not to be used in support of campaigns. The city's use of corporate resources applies to municipal councillors, candidates, and also actually city employees as well. City of Guelph facilities, services, and property may not be used for any election-related purposes except as they are identified in that policy. That is available online right now. It will be available again through our candidates portal as well as on guelph.ca/vote. We really encourage you to familiarize yourself with this policy. It's posted again on the city's website currently under the policy section, bylaws and policies, so you can access it there. And again, it will be linked through the candidates section of the city's website. So let's talk a little bit about what election will look like. We encourage individuals obviously to vote early in the election. It helps us with line management on voting day, and the more people that can get out in advance, if they're comfortable casting their ballot in advance, the less lineups we have on election day. We know that sometimes election day rolls around and it's 5:00 p.m. and folks haven't voted, so they're running out to the polls. This helps us get ahead of those long lines. Voters will be able to cast their ballots in 3 ways during the advanced voting period. In September, a mail-in ballot can be requested through an online form on the city's election website or by calling the city clerk's office. The home vote service pilot will be offered for the first time to eligible voters who are unable to vote using other methods due to illness, injury, or disability. As a pilot, there will be a limited number of appointments that can be booked. So it is considered a pilot. We're working through it. It's not something that is done in many other municipalities. We have a handful of municipalities that we know have operated and offered a similar option. And so we're looking to pilot it in 2022 with hopes potentially of expanding it as we go forward. Voters will need to register directly for the services, and candidates will not be permitted to register electors for this service or on behalf of voters. And then, of course, there's the in-person voting option. So in-person voting locations will also be offered from October 8th to 10th and from the 14th to the 16th. So we're offering it over 2 weekends. We continue to offer vote anywhere options as we did in 2014 and 2018, which means during the advance period, you can vote at any of the voting locations that we will offer during the advance period, regardless of where you live within the city. And we are going to probably be announcing those voting locations fairly shortly in the coming weeks. Each location that we select for advanced voting will be fully accessible. So from a physical accessibility standpoint, those locations will be fully accessible. On election day, if voters haven't had the opportunity again to cast their ballot during the advanced voting period, they can obviously cast their ballot on October 24th, obviously the last day to cast their ballot. On election day, ballots can only be cast in person at voting locations across the city. We are continuing, as we did in previous elections, to offer a vote anywhere within the ward that you live in on election day. So we will have anywhere between 5 and 7 voting locations within each ward. You can attend any one of those locations within the ward that you live in. And it's important to note, if an elector shows up at a voting location that's outside of their ward, obviously the staff at those voting locations will be prepared to support them and to redirect them to the correct voting location. Each of the locations that we select for voting meets physical accessibility standards, obviously as required. And one voting location in each of those wards will have a full suite of accessible voting equipment, which includes an audio tactile interface, so an audio handheld interface where individuals can wear headphones. The ballot can be read out to them. It will offer paddles, so navigating the ballot yes or no using paddles, or also pneumatic sip and puff. So if an individual uses a sip and puff pneumatic device, they can also cast their ballot independently. And we'll have, again, one of those voting machines in each of the wards on election day. And again, some important dates. So May 2nd, I think, as everyone probably is well aware, not that far from now, nomination period will open. We accept nominations at any time that City Hall is open. August 19th is the end of the nomination period. The date there is, or the time that's there that mentions 2 p.m. is specific, and it's specific in the Municipal Elections Act. There is no ability for myself or my team to deviate from that time. 2:01 is too late to file a nomination paper on August 19th. As I mentioned, the 8th to the 10th of October and the 14th to the 16th of October is advanced voting. Election day is the 24th of October. We will offer official results and a confirmation of the results on October 25th or shortly thereafter. November 15th, the new term of council begins. We will have the inaugural meeting of the new council on November 15th. And January 3rd, the campaign period ends. So you can continue to receive contributions through the end of the campaign period, which is officially January 3rd, 2023. You have a deadline as a candidate or a potential candidate to file your financial filing and statements by March 31st. Again, there's a 2 p.m. deadline there. That's set in legislation. I don't have any authority to change that. And you can also there's an extension to that, which we can get into if there's questions. What I'll say on all the campaign financial filings, at our last session we offered online, we had colleagues from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in attendance. They went through a long deck that had quite a bit of information. They're not here tonight to join us. Tonight will probably hopefully be a lot more dialogue focused and question and answer. But that presentation was very valuable, and I would encourage all of you, both in attendance here and those attending from home watching online, to avail yourself of that presentation, which we will make available following this evening's presentation. So you can again tune into that last offering and hear what our colleagues at the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing offered as well. That's a really important slide. Take a screenshot, jot the numbers down, whatever works for you. Our election email is guelphvotes@guelph.ca. Our election phone line direct to the election team is 519-837-5625. And our election website again is guelph.ca/vote. What I can encourage you is guelph.ca/vote is the one place, the one true place where you can get accurate and correct information on elections. You can encourage, if you're out campaigning, encourage residents, electors to visit that site for the most up-to-date and current information. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my good friend and my colleague, Fred Dean, and Fred's going to walk you through his presentation.
Well, good evening, whether you're in the Ethernet or sitting in the room here. This is a really important session. As Stephen mentioned, I've been doing this for a number of years now, and I do a lot of presentations and a lot of work with councils right around the province. And I think this may be the most important one I do, because it gives you, if you're thinking of running for council, it gives you a sense of whether it is in fact what you want to be doing. What are some of the issues around being a member of council? What are some of the issues around having your family involved? And the family is very much involved with this on a regular basis when you get elected to office. I have a huge respect for members of council. I wouldn't be working in this field for as many years as I have without the respect. I think if you're going to go into this, you have to have two things. You have to have a vision for your community. You have to be thinking about what your community, where it should be going and how to get there. and you have to have integrity. And I'm going to talk about the integrity, particularly as we go through some of the material that I want to cover in the next few minutes. Stephen mentioned that I'm retired. I'm not retired. I retired from practicing law, which, but that's as close as I've gotten to retirement. I'm busier now than I was 5 years ago. I'm not going to spend time on that. That's who I am. I've been doing this for a long time. Let me tell you what I'm going to talk about. I think it's important to have a sense of what municipal government is. And so I'm going to give you the Municipal Government 101. Normally this takes a full day, up to 4 or 5 days to do this program adequately. We're going to do it in about 7 minutes. And we'll get through what I think are the basics and what you need to have a sense about what local government is. I then want to talk about municipal powers, because it's really significant if you're a member of council to understand where power, firstly, where power comes from, and secondly, who has the ability to exercise power within the organization. That's really fundamental, and it's really key for not only council members to understand, but the public and the staff as well. Municipal government in Ontario is without any doubt the most accountable and the most transparent level of government that we have. And I'll demonstrate that in a few minutes. I'll give you some examples of that. It's really important to understand that decisions are made in a public setting. They are not made behind closed doors. And that's fundamental, and it's really important to what you become involved with. I get calls throughout the term, the 4-year term, from municipalities who are having difficulties. And they call and say, can you come and help us out? We're struggling with some issues. And often those issues revolve around who's responsible for doing what, who does what are the roles and what are the responsibilities, and where do they come from? And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because it seems to me if you're running for council, you should know what the job is that you're offering yourself to do. Really important, and we'll spend a few minutes on that. I'm going to talk about personal considerations. What's life like for you the day after you get elected? Because your world changes big time. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk a bit about your family. And then we'll talk about personal considerations in terms of obligations you have under the councillor's code of conduct that the municipality has. And then we'll talk about confidentiality, and we'll talk about the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. All of those things are personal obligations. And I want to spend a bit of time and just give you a sense of what they're about. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about water, because I think water is a terrific example of the importance of the role that the members of council fulfill. So we're going to cover a lot in a relatively short period of time. Usually when I do these presentations, I have something in front of me that tells me where I am. So if I'm 3 slides away from you, you'll understand that I don't have it here. We'll figure it out. I love this part. If you're at home, you're not going to be able to participate other than I suggest you take a blank piece of paper. And when we're finished all this, we're going to help you with it here. But take a blank piece of paper. And what I want to do with the group here is I want to identify as many things as we can in about 5 minutes as to what municipalities do, what local government does for your community. Who can start? Give me something. And I want you to think at not the 30,000 foot level. I want you to think at the 10-foot level. Let's start here. Yes, sir. Waste collection, what kind? Yeah. What 2 streams are there? Yeah, okay, that's right. Recycling, garbage, and green bins, that's right. So that's one. Another one. Yeah. What do you get before you have wastewater treatment? That's right. Municipalities are pretty rare when you think about it. We give you the water and we take it back. Most people don't sell you things and then take it back at the end of the process. So, but that's well, you pay for it, of course. That's really significant. It's really important. So they'll tie into what we talk about water later. Something else. Transit, sure. Really important, both regular transit and disabled transit, really significant part of a community. Another one. Passing bylaws, regulating all sorts of things you pass bylaws for, and we're going to see the importance of bylaws in just about 5 minutes. Yep. Okay, let's talk about roads for a minute. Roads is kind of the 30,000 foot level answer. Let's get it down a bit. What do you mean by, what are we talking about when we talk about roads? Why does everybody talk about potholes? It's that time of year. Trust me. No. We did surveys in Sudbury, interestingly enough, and it depended on the time of year that who picked what was the most important thing. If it was in January, it was winter maintenance. If it was in July, it was barking dogs. And we could consistently predict, we put 1,000 of these out, and that's what we would get back. So you had to make sure what time of year you were doing surveys in terms of what are important services. What else do you do with roads? Yeah, what else? Pave them, that's right. What else? No, I want to stick with roads. We aren't anywhere near where we need to be. Traffic service, you have to regulate them. I mean, you determine how fast you go, where you can park, all those things, regulating. Crossing guards, yeah, what else? Straight out, that's part of the regulation of the flow of traffic. What else? Signage, that's regulation of, what else? Municipalities create roads and they authorize roads when there are new subdivisions. Really significant stuff. The other thing about roads is roads are conduits. Roads carry all sorts of services underneath and on surface, but underneath, for hydro and for a whole series of gas, natural gas, whatever. So they're really significant. They're huge in terms of drainage. I'm sorry? Fiber, all of those services. And municipalities have to have agreements with all of those agencies that are providing those services. Don't forget pedestrians. You have to provide for pedestrians on roads. Cyclists, yeah, that's more and more important all the time. I live in the center of Toronto, and I, on an average day, see just about as many bikes as I do cars. Well, we could talk about living in Toronto, but that's, yeah, driving wise, no fun. Okay, let's pick something other than roads. Community buildings, give me an example. Yeah. Arts community is really important. Yep. What kind of ties into arts and community buildings? The thing that I thought of immediately was library. Having libraries. Here's something interesting about libraries. If council wants to have a library in this community, it can't do it. It has to have a library board, a public library board. The province under legislation says that that is required. There are a number of local boards. Can you think of another local board? No, yeah, they are local boards, but they're actually they're in a separate category. School boards are separate. No, that's a department of the city. Police, that's a department of the city here too, isn't it? Is it a local board? No, that's true. Conservation authorities, for example, health units, there are a number of examples of that. So those boards are separate entities in law, and they all have a link to the city, but that link is different and it's based on the legislation that they are created by. So really good example of the arts. We talked about recreation. What's involved in recreation? Well, let's just talk about the community center to start with. You have facilities like community centers, like arenas, pools, skating rinks, all of those facilities. What else about recreation? Parks. This is a city known for parks. It's terrific. Programming. You offer a huge number of programs in your facilities. That's a significant, I think, benefit to the success of a community is to have a good recreational program, just as libraries. Interestingly, study after study have said that communities with really good library systems are much better, seen as much better places to live than without a good library system. It's really important. You think of anything else? Okay, we've probably got up to 40, 35 or 40. They're over 100. So maybe when you go home tonight, you can think of a few more. Yes. Diversity in the community, in buildings and in programs as well. That's right, exactly. Lots of other things. Cemeteries, for example. Licensing. Municipalities in the city license businesses. They also license marriages. You know, so it's in the licensing. I'm sorry? No divorces. No, we're not in. Okay. Let's bring it back in, but I want to give you a sense of just how broad the scope is of what municipalities do. And understand this, that all of the decisions and all of the responsibilities in terms of decisions and policy around that rest with council. It's really significant in terms of the responsibilities that are put on a local council to make decisions and set policy going forward. And it really has an impact of what your community looks like and what it feels like. Okay. Amazing. Okay. This is Municipal Government 101 in 5 minutes. Municipalities don't have any inherent jurisdiction. By that, I mean, you can't just do whatever you want to do. All of the power for municipalities comes from the province. All of the power comes from the province. You've heard the phrase municipalities are children of the provincial government. They're mandated by the provincial government. And we learned that again in really specific detail with the recent Supreme Court of Canada decision over the City of Toronto. Remember in 2018, right in the election, middle of the election campaign, the government, provincial government, sliced the size of council in Toronto by half. Talk about chaos in terms of trying to figure out what the wards looked like and all going forward. But the court at the end of the day said municipalities are created by the province and the province has the jurisdiction to make changes to them. So it's pretty significant. 2001 was a really significant year in local government in Ontario because prior to that time, municipalities were size mattered. There were villages and townships and towns and small cities and big cities. And the powers that were given to those municipalities increased based on the size. And you could tell the size of a municipality by the name it had. You knew the township had so many population, a town a bit more. 2001, that all disappeared. It's gone. And now there are only 3 kinds of municipalities in the province. The first is single-tier municipality, and that's the City of Guelph. It's also every single municipality in Northern Ontario. And it's some others, City of London, City of Kingston, there are some places in Southern Ontario. Here's the key. All of those powers that the province gives to municipalities, this bundle of powers, single-tier municipalities get the whole bundle. There it is. You got it. Figure it out. That's pretty significant difference. So if you're from Township of Ear Falls in Northwestern Ontario with a population of 1,500 people, you now have the same powers as the City of Guelph. That's a huge change. The other two kinds of municipalities are lower tier or local municipalities and upper tier. And upper tier are counties and regions and the District of Muskoka. So two levels of government. The lower tier are the cities and the towns and the townships within that within that geographical area. The powers from the province in that case gets divided between upper tier, lower tier. And it's different all over the province. So Wellington County will have powers divided in a certain way. The region of York will have the powers divided in different ways. So they're different, and that's not really important for us tonight, but it's just a sense of where the province was coming in terms of looking at the size of municipalities. Make reference to Section 5 of the Municipal Act. It came into the Act in 2001, and it is, in my opinion, probably the most important section in the entire Act. Municipal Act is a pretty thick document, makes a great doorstop, but it's big. Okay, Section 5 is right near the beginning, and it's really short and it's really simple. And it says this: that all powers of a municipality shall be exercised by council. Powers of a municipality shall be exercised by council. Council shall, and shall is mandatory. Whenever you see the word shall in an agreement or a bylaw or an act or statute, it's mandatory. So powers shall be exercised by council and shall be exercised by bylaw. Here's what it doesn't say. It doesn't say powers shall be exercised by members of council or by staff or by the mayor, but shall be exercised by council. And you need to be able to trace back this exercise of power in each case. It's really fundamental. If you're thinking of running for council as a member of council, as a councillor, you do not have all the powers of the municipality. They rest with the council sitting as a whole. So how do these bylaws get passed? Well, they get passed at what I call a duly constituted meeting. Amazing, it's great. A duly constituted meeting has a bunch of elements to it that really need to pay some attention to. First is you have to tell the public you're holding a meeting. Clerk's office has an obligation to give notice of all the meetings that are held. All the council meetings, regular ones and special ones, all the committee meetings, all the open meetings, and all the closed meetings. The obligation is really important. I talked about transparency, the ability for people to be aware that a meeting's being held. And there has to be an agenda with reports and material, and they're made available to the public as well. So the public is entitled to know a meeting is going to be held, and it's entitled to know what the issues are going to be that are deliberated at the meeting. The meeting has to be open to the public. Public has to be able to attend, whether it's in person or what we've lived with for the last couple of years, virtual. The public has to be able to attend for it to be an open meeting. The courts have said consistently that the primary purpose of the public at council meetings is to observe how decisions are made by the council. Really fundamental. The next part of the duly constituted meeting is there must be a quorum. Quorum means a majority of the members. Now, in your case, that's 7. Right, 7, 13 and 7. I work with 5 because I've got 5 fingers and I don't add up very well. So let's take a council of 5. To have a meeting, there has to be a quorum. So 5 people are there, that's quorum. If 3 people are there, that's a quorum. So council can meet in that circumstance with 3 members present. The next test is that things are passed, bylaws and resolutions, by a majority vote. That's a majority of the members present. So if all 5 are there at my council, 3 have to vote in favor of it. If only 3 are there, 2 have to vote in favor of it. Interestingly, that's less than the majority of council, but 2 members have the ability in that circumstance to exercise the power of the corporation. The last part of a duly constituted meeting in my world is that everybody votes, including the head of council. Head of council chairs council meetings. We'll see that in a minute. Everybody has a vote on council. It's really fundamental. So in order to exercise power as a municipality, you have to pass a bylaw, it has to be done. You have to tell the public in advance. You have to give the notice. You have to set the agenda out. It has to be open to the public. There has to be a quorum present. Majority vote prevails and everybody votes. Those are the fundamentals of a meeting of council or a meeting of committee. So let's talk about accountable and transparent government. I said before that probably without any doubt, local government is the most accountable and the most transparent government. I don't know if it's still there, but on the provincial website for a number of years, there was a description of cabinet. And one of the things that was on the website said the cabinet decisions are made in secret and they are kept secret. They are not made available to the public. That's a really different world than you live in if you're on a municipal council. It's a really different world. So I want to give you some examples of how local government right across the province are accountable and transparent. And probably the best example is the fact that you have to have meetings. Meetings have to be open to the public. Municipal Act says meetings shall be open to the public. There are some limited reasons for which you can go as a council or as a committee into a closed meeting. There's a list of items, subject matters, and you must fall within one of those subject matters to go into a closed meeting. Section 239 sets out in some detail, but it goes farther than that. It says if you're going to have a closed meeting, council, you have to pass a resolution first, saying that you're going to hold a closed meeting and what the general nature of the matter or the matters you're going to talk about and deliberate. Again, that's transparency. And lastly, the province has set rules around what you can do at closed meetings as a council. What kinds of votes can you do? It's all set out in the Municipal Act, and it's pretty clear, but it's clear that the exception is the fact that there is limited reasons to go into closed meetings, and the starting point always is meetings have to be open to the public. On the other side of the screen talks about council policies. And there are a number of them that council has to have in place. These are passed by bylaw, so they're passed in a public setting. I want to just mention a couple of them just quickly. One is there is a policy called the Accountability and Transparency Policy. If you're thinking of running for council, you need to look at that policy because it will describe for you how the city is attempting to ensure that it is being accountable and transparent. So it's a really significant document. It's one worth having a look at. Take a look, read it through. It'll give you a sense of exactly what sort of things the city is doing to make itself transparent to the public. The other one that I just wanted to mention quickly is new or relatively new. It's the second one from the bottom, and it says there has to be a council or a policy for council members and staff. Notice it doesn't say council and staff, it says council members. This is individuals. and it ties in to the council code of conduct. So again, that may be one that you want to have a look at, because we're going to talk about the role of council members in a few minutes. We're going to talk about the role of staff. So all of these policies are in place. They're intended not to be dust collectors. They're intended to be active and acted upon in a regular basis and reviewed from time to time. It's important to do. Let's talk about roles and responsibilities. Who does what within the organization, and where does that authority come from? Well, not surprisingly, the province has set job descriptions. They're found again in the Municipal Act. I'm going to talk about three of them. One is council, the other is the head of council, and the third is staff. What are the respective roles? What is the expectation that the province has in terms of fulfilling your role as a member of council, or as a member of staff, or as the head of council? And let's kind of go through these quickly and get a sense of what they're about. Council is pretty much like a board of directors of a business corporation. In fact, it is a board of directors of a municipal corporation. Municipalities are corporations in law. They are not business corporations. They're very specific to be municipal. Council exercises corporate powers, and we've talked about exercising powers, and that there's no surprise in that. That makes some sense. The Act goes on to say that council represents the public. You won't see that when it comes to staff, but it does apply to council, and that's not surprising. Council members are out in the community, they're hearing from people, they're talking to people, they're getting feedback, and they're bringing that feedback to council as part of the process that's going on. The next one is interesting, and it says that members of council have an obligation in council to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality. And I've always interpreted the word municipality in that subsection to mean, firstly, the geographical boundaries, the community of Guelph, if you will, but also to mean the municipal corporation, that there's an obligation on members of council to act in the best interests of the municipal corporation. That shouldn't be a surprise either. If every municipality has policies of insurance in place, and one of the provisions in that policy is not only members of council, but staff will act in the best interests of the municipal corporation. This is just an echo, if you will, of what the municipality has contractually obligated itself to in its insurance policies. Council acts collectively. We've seen that. We've talked about that. Publicly, you have to be making decisions in public. And with notice, you have to tell the public you're holding a meeting and what you're going to be debating and deliberating. There is nothing in the Municipal Act that gives any member of council or council itself any management responsibilities. Provinces draw a line between administration and the elected policymakers. So if you're thinking of running for council because you want to be able to direct work, tell employees how to do the work, forget it. I'll talk more about that a little bit later, because it creates in some places some really difficult situations. The role of members of council is part of this collective body called council making decisions through that process I described earlier. If you're elected to council, one of the parts of the training that you will receive after being elected is the powers that you do have as a member and what limitations there are. And there are limitations on the powers of members of council. They're found in various places, legislation and elsewhere. All right, let's move to the head of council. Amazing. Remember 2001, kind of a key year? The legislation before that, for 150 years, talked about mayors and reeves and wardens and chairs. In 2001, all those terms in the provincial legislation disappeared. They're gone. and they're replaced by one phrase, and that is the head of council. So in the city of Guelph, the head of council is the mayor. That's the title that is given. Interestingly, after 2001, councils could change by bylaw. They could pass a bylaw to change the title of the head of council. Before 2001, to change the title of the head of council, there had to be a private member's bill through the provincial legislature. Best example of that, there is one municipality in Ontario that has a Lord Mayor. Do you know where that is? It's Niagara-on-the-Lake. Niagara-on-the-Lake has a Lord Mayor. And I think it was given by special legislation back, I think in the 80s. It might have been the 70s though. The other interesting thing that happened since 2001, for example, in the county of Renfrew, up in the Ottawa Valley, there are a whole group of townships. There's towns at Renfrew and Pembroke, but there's a whole group of townships, and they all got together and talked, and they said, you know, this head of council being the reeve doesn't carry the same sort of weight as being a mayor. So they changed. All of the townships changed their bylaw and named their head of council the mayor, and they're entitled to do that. You're not restricted by the names. You can pick another name if you want. Use your imagination. Nobody's done that yet, but possibilities are there. So let's go through the responsibilities of a mayor. I can tell you it is a very different world sitting in the chair of the head of a council than it is other members of the councilors, members of council. The obligations and responsibilities are very different. The workload is very different. It's just a different perspective on the world. The first thing that the Act says is that the head of council presides over council meetings. That's not new. What's new, though, in the last few years, the province added the words so that meetings are run efficiently and effectively. And what that says to me is you better be good at it. You need to get some training on being effective at chairing meetings. Frankly, I'll talk about individual councilors in a few minutes. The head of council also has an obligation to provide leadership to council. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say provide leadership to the municipal organization. It says provide leadership to council. Again, that's the dividing line between administration and the council side. It's important to keep that in mind. Head of council has a responsibility that is different than every other member of council. And that is the head of council speaks on behalf of the municipality. It's in the Act. So how does the head of council know what to say? What position to take? Well, when council speaks, it passes bylaws and resolutions, and that's what the mayor is obligated to speak on. The things that council has made determinations and decisions on. It's a power that's not given to any other member of council. Mayor has some obligations to provide advice to council on different things, and you can see them listed on the slide. I won't read them. But again, that's just that part of leadership role of being the head of council and leadership over the rest of council. The head of council, for a long, long time, has had the title of Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the municipality. And if you're from a business background, the CEO is the day-to-day manager, responsible for day-to-day management of the operation. This was a big issue back 15 years ago or so, and a debate around municipal circles right around the province. And some people were saying, get rid of the term, it's confusing. And other people were saying, no, keep it, but define it. And the province decided to do that. So there is now a section in the Municipal Act that says, here's what it means to be the CEO of a municipality. And if you read through that list, there's about 6 items, 5 or 6 items on the list. You end up with the impression that the role and the responsibility of the head of council is as the champion of the municipality, the cheerleader for the municipality. There's nothing in the legislation that gives the head of council, or as the CEO or the head of council generally, any management responsibilities. It's not there. It's not in the act. So that clarification, I think, has been helpful. Although in the last year or so, there's been some rumblings that maybe the province should get rid of it. But at this point, it's there and it's defined in the legislation. Let's flip to the other side and let's talk about staff for a minute, the administration. The first thing, and this is pretty close to what is in the Municipal Act itself in terms of wording. The first thing is staff have an obligation to undertake research and provide advice to council. That means that staff is the primary source of information for members of council when they're about to make a decision. Staff prepares reports. Staff puts in those reports a recommendation, usually in the form of the motion that council's being asked to adopt. Council has an obligation to hear from staff on issues. It's in the act and it's really clear, and it's good, but it's more than that. It's really how municipalities right around the province operate. They receive information and reports from staff. The better the reports from staff, the better the decision councils make, in my experience. Writing reports to council is a real skill. I know I've done a lot of them, and you really, staff have a huge job in putting agendas together and getting the reports done. But the act says that the council has to receive the advice after the staff has done the research and provided the report. Once council has made a decision, staff have an obligation to implement that decision, whether council agreed with staff's recommendation or not. Doesn't happen very often, but it happens occasionally. The obligation on staff is to implement the decision that council makes. The last thing in the section is that there have to be policies and procedures for the staff to have in place. Why? To carry out council's decision. There's that decision-making part again. These aren't council policies. These are day-to-day how every single department operates. So the clerk's office will have a bunch of policies. Public Works will have them. They'll have them for roads. Recreation will have. These are just the day-to-day manuals of how you get work done. It's really significant. It's really important, but the Act contemplates it. This slide I've been using for a long, long time. Probably used it even before 3 or 4 elections ago. Because I like the image. It's from a book from Osborne and Gabler called Reinventing Government. I think it was written in the 1970s. But the image is council should steer the boat rather than row it. Council sets the direction, staff undertakes the work to make it happen. That's fundamental. I debate whether to take it out, but I like the image that it provides. I want to talk about governance for a few moments. Municipal government is important to have a sense of this because it begins to lead us into some of the responsibilities of members of council. And when I talk about governance, what I mean is how does council come to make decisions? And that, I think it's pretty fundamental. And we've seen that the primary resource for information for council are the staff reports that are being put on agendas for council and for committees. That's clear. Council has the ability to create committees. And I have to tell you, there are 444 municipalities and there are probably 444 committee structures across the province. They all vary. Some municipalities, not very many, but some don't have any committees at all. These are small places and they have a council of 5 and they say, we don't need committees, we'll do the work. Most municipalities have some sort of committees, different types of committees, and they're in place. But here's the key. Council gets to create them. Council gets to set the mandate for the committee. Committees don't set their own mandate. And council populates the committee, puts people on it who are going to serve on that committee. And sometimes it's members of council and sometimes it's members of the public. So committees are there and they are created. Committees are created to provide advice and make recommendations to council, do some legwork, if you will, and get that advice to council so that, again, council can make an effective decision. I talked about the public and the fact that the public role primarily is to observe at council meetings, but council has the ability to hear from the public at council meetings or at committee meetings. And that is done by way of delegations. People appear as delegation at a council meeting and they can be heard. They want to put their point of view forward. They want to try and convince council to do something. There is no automatic right in the public to speak at a council meeting. You have to fit within the rules that council set, and those rules are found in the procedure bylaw. There are plenty of ways for the public to interact with council members outside of the council chamber, and we'll talk about those in a few minutes, but they're there. But in terms of the council structure and the governance model in terms of making decisions, council determines what the delegation process is and how many will be on each meeting and process that's involved in doing it. Talked about local boards. Again, that's a part of the governance model. If you're thinking of running for council, I commend you for that to start with. But if you're thinking of running for council, you better love meetings. I mean, you better love meetings and you better get good at it, because if you don't, you're going to have 4 years of complete and utter frustration. Meetings take a lot of time. I've had people say to me in these sessions, I had it just 2 weeks ago, somebody said, it's 2 meetings a month. That's all I'm signing up for. No, it isn't. It's 2 meetings a month, probably, and maybe some special council meetings. It's committee meetings, the committees that you're on. You might be on some local boards like the library, and you might be on other groups within the community. Meetings will take over a lot of your life. And you better enjoy them, and you better really get good at achieving the result that you want to achieve. Because if you don't, it's an awful 4 years. And you'll be miserable, but the people around you will be even more miserable having to deal with you. So number one thing, it's going to take a lot of time out of your life, and you've got to get good at it. We'll talk more about meetings in a few minutes. One of the important elements, important documents, if you will, in a municipality is the procedure bylaw. And I describe it as one of the 2 most important documents in the municipality. The other one's the annual budget. Annual budget sets your policy, says where you're going, both short-term for the year and long-term in your capital program. But the procedure bylaw does so many important things. It sets the rules for meetings. It defines relationships between members of council and the head of council, between council and staff, and between council and the public. It sets out the governance model in terms of the committees that you're going to have and what their mandate is. It has a number of issues around ethical conduct that are contained and that are appropriate at council meetings. It's a really important document. If you're thinking of running for council, read it. Read the whole thing. It's really important. It's not one of those theoretical documents or really boring documents. It's really significant. It's really important, and I urge you to do it. The annual budget is the other document. The 2 documents, procedure bylaw and the annual budget, both current and capital. So I want to talk about procedure or personal considerations. The day that you are elected to office, the next day your world changes. It changes instantly. People won't talk to you the same way. People will approach you in a much different way. Your friends will talk to you differently. People on the street will stop and want to ask you questions and talk to you and share their point of view. It begins right away, even before you take office, because there's a bit of time between the election and taking office. People will see you differently. They should. You are now a community leader. You're a leader within this community. That's really significant. That's really important. One of the other things that is a reality is once you're elected, it is 24/7. You never get to set aside being a member of council. No one in the community will let you forget that you are a member of council. It is there all the time, all the time. And it requires, I think, a total commitment by people who want to do this. If you want to be good at this, it's a tough job. I can tell you right now, being a member of council is really tough work, but it requires a total commitment. And I'm going to talk about some of those commitments as we go through it. And the other thing is, life in a municipality will totally consume you. I have this practice that I've been doing for a long time now. I find people, both staff who've retired and members of council who are no longer on council. And after about 6 months, I have a chat with them. I say, so how's it going? What's life like after municipal government? And the answer is consistently, I had no idea how much it consumed my life. It took over my life. Being on council is really fun. It's really hard work and it's rewarding some days. It's frustrating other days, but it will just totally consume you. And it, as I say, it takes a lot of time. Stephen, I know we're single tier, but I want to tell you a two-tier story. And this is an actual story, happened about 12, 15 years ago. I was in Eastern Ontario. So that was a community that had lower tier towns and whatnot, and a county, upper tier. And I was doing a presentation, and along with me was a former mayor of the town, a nearby town of where we were speaking. And he told this story. He said, you know, I was on council. I was a councillor for a term, and I decided to run for mayor. And he said, you know what? I won. And I was elated, and I went home that night and I said to my wife, I won. I'm the mayor and I'm going to be on county council. He's really excited. And he said the same thing when his 8-year-old son came in the room, and his 8-year-old son looked at him and said, I guess I lost. He understood that he was about to lose his dad for a lot more time than he had when he was just a counselor. Understand this is a huge time commitment, whether you sit as a counselor or whether you sit as the mayor. And in a two-tier structure where you're doing both, upper tier, lower tier, it's a huge obligation. That was a pretty powerful story. The people in the room were really taken back by it. Understand this will consume you. It will take a lot of your time, and it will take a lot of your time if you're good at what you do. The expectation is you will be prepared consistently. So here's some thoughts. Talk to your family. Making the decision to run for council isn't just an individual one, it's really a family one. Phones will ring, not as much, we all have our own cell phone now, but phones will ring at home, or you'll have things on the internet. Kids are going to see things on social media that could be pretty upsetting to them at some point from time to time. You need to have the conversation with your family. How do you deal with people? What happens when your spouse goes to the grocery store and can't get out of the grocery store because people want to talk about that terrible decision council made last week. And it happens. One of the most dramatic times I had in Sudbury was really interesting. Sudbury, this is a long time ago, was the only major municipality in Ontario that had a store hours bylaw, which said you have to be closed stores these hours. Nobody else did that. They just said you can pick your own hours stores. And a council member came to me and said, I'd like to expand the store hours by 2 hours a week. 2 hours a week. And my response was, that's a really bad idea. And he said, no, 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 I want to do it. This is important. So I drafted all the documents, did the report to council, prepared the bylaw, went to council. Council approved it, and the community, the business community, went crazy. They were so angry at council. So every time a council member went into a store or went to get gas or whatever, they got picked on by the people in the store. More interesting though, so did their spouses. Their spouses were berated by people at checkout counters and by owners of businesses. The impact was incredible. The counselor, by the way, came back to me. He said, that was a mistake, wasn't it? I said, yeah, it was a mistake. Communities get passionate about issues, and those issues can really have an impact, not just on the member, but on the spouses as well. I think this election is going to be fought in a large measure on social media. We're going to see more of that than we've ever seen before, and I don't know what the scope and the bounds of it are. I told you before that you better love meetings and you got to get good at meetings. But here's something else. You better love to read. I mean, you better really love to read. I don't know what the number of pages would be. 150 a week? Way more than 150 a week. I was being, okay, so you get 150. Let's be conservative. 150 pages come to you, and that's to prepare you for the upcoming meetings, committees, council, local boards, whatever. You have an obligation to read every single page for two reasons. First is the expectation everybody in the room and everybody watching and the staff have is that you're prepared for the meeting. And if you're not, what are you doing on council? You need to be prepared. Simple as that. But here's the other reason you need to read every single page. Somewhere buried in that 150 plus pages, there may be a conflict of interest that you have, that you weren't aware it was coming at you. You have an obligation to find those and then deal with them. And I'll talk about how you deal with those in a few minutes. So you better love meetings and you better love to prepare and read. So what does that do again to your family life? It takes away from time with your family. Counselors in Sudbury years ago used to use Sundays to read agendas. They basically said to their family, Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening, I'm reading the agendas. It takes a lot of preparation to be a good counselor. And I can tell you that everybody in the room knows when a counselor is not prepared. Everybody knows. It's the counselor who asks a question of staff, the answer of which is to be found in the third paragraph of the report. They hadn't read the report. If you're going to be on council, you need to commit right from day one that you are going to be prepared for meetings. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. Okay, I talked about trying to manage staff. We call it in the business micromanaging, where council members want to direct work, want to tell staff how to do something. Micromanagement by a member of council can have a huge negative impact on your organization. Huge. It becomes difficult for staff. It has to be dealt with, not only by CAO, but also by the entire organization. Micromanaging is a really important issue. Before I get to incivility, I forgot to mention, there are two people in the municipal organization. There are a lot of really significant, important people that work with the municipality, but there are two from your point of view, if you're thinking of running for council. The first is the chief administrative officer, who I've talked about, senior administration person. If you have questions about policy or just general questions about the municipality in terms of where council's making decisions and some of the issues, the CAO is the person to talk to. The second person is the clerk. Stephen talked about being a statutory officer. He has two job descriptions. One comes from the province, and the minute he's appointed by bylaw, member council exercises power by passing bylaws, appointing a clerk is an exercise of power. Once he is appointed, he has all kinds of specific responsibilities from the province. Taking minutes at meetings, running elections, marriages, and the list goes on. It's huge. So there are other statutory officers, treasurer, fire chief, chief building official, others. But the two I think that are important, and certainly Stephen talked about, if you have questions during the election process, how do you get advice? It's through his department and the people that are working on the election. Really critical if you're thinking of running for council. Incivility has been around a long time. People being uncivil with each other, whether it's a member of council to another member, to staff, to the public, whatever. It has come grown as an issue in some parts of the province in a really significant way. And it's cost some municipalities huge sums of money. We're talking in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. I said at the beginning, I think you need to have a vision and integrity. And if you have integrity, you're not going to get into incivility. About 3 years ago, we began to put in all of our presentations a full description and discussion with whether staff or members of council on incivility. It's important, it's disruptive, and it has a huge impact in a negative way on your organization as a municipality. I'm going to talk about confidentiality. I'll do that in a few minutes. Council members carry around all sorts of confidential information because they're community leaders. And I want to talk a little bit about that and what's involved in doing that. But let's start by talking about council codes of conduct. Up until just very few years ago, there were a handful of municipalities that had codes of conduct for members of council. Weren't very many. They were allowed, but they weren't mandatory. And they would have an integrity commissioner whose responsibility was to do investigations when complaints came in and report to council. 2-3 years ago now, the province made them, the codes of conduct, mandatory. Every municipality in the province has to have a code of conduct for its members of council and committees, and expanded the role of integrity commissioner from beyond just doing investigations to doing things like educating members of council on appropriate conduct and the code of conduct and all the ethical issues within the procedure bylaw. And it gave the integrity commissioner a new power. And that relates to the ability of a member of council to ask for an opinion from the integrity commissioner in advance of a situation, either under the code or under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. And the integrity commissioner has to give advice back in writing. That's a pretty cool tool for a member of council. It's something new. And it's important, and I think it's a good idea at the end of the day. It has to be in writing, and that's the important part of it. I want to mention, and maybe Stephen, do you know, Bill 10 is before the legislature. Do you know where it stands? Okay, let me just tell you about Bill 10 really quickly, and I'll read the title, and that kind of gets your attention. It's the Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act, 2022. The Stopping Harassment and Abuse by Local Leaders Act. It provides that council can direct its integrity commissioner to bring an application to court to have the court throw a member of council off council. It's a pretty dramatic difference, pretty dramatic change. We'll see if it gets through before the legislature comes to an end because of the provincial election, but it's there now. And frankly, I think it has a lot to do with the conduct of one member of council in the city of Ottawa. It's been really destructive. Stay tuned. We'll see. I want to talk about the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. This act has been in effect since 1972. It came into effect because a member of council, if they had a business and they wanted to supply goods or services to the municipality, was prohibited from doing so. They weren't allowed to do it. This act came in and allowed members of council to provide goods and services to the municipality and dealt with situations where a member would have a pecuniary interest. Pecuniary means financial, by the way. It applies to members of council. It is a personal obligation. It does not apply to staff. The act hasn't changed a lot until a couple of years ago, and I'll tell you about those changes in a minute. So what does pecuniary mean? Well, it means financial. If you have a financial interest in a matter that's coming to council or a committee of council, you have an obligation to take certain steps that are required under the act. They can be direct pecuniary interests. So if I own Fred's widget shop on Main Street and I want to supply widgets to the municipality, clearly that's a pecuniary interest. When the matter comes to council, beginning of the meeting, there's an item at the beginning where declarations are made. And I would say, Your Worship, I want to declare a pecuniary interest on item 4 because I own Fred's widget shop. And the clerk would take down my declaration and put it in the minutes so that everybody will be able to see going forward, on this day I made the declaration. But there are a number of other pecuniary interests that are indirect. They can be family, parent, spouse, or child if it's known to the member. They can be employer, employee, members of bodies within the community. There are a whole series of relationships, if you will, that can impact whether you have a pecuniary interest. And if it's an interest of one of these other parties that is linked to you under this act, it becomes your pecuniary interest and you have to deal with it. There's a book called Ontario's Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, a handbook. And it's published by Municipal World. Just go to the Municipal World website, you see they have a whole bunch of different books, but this one is a really good read. If you're thinking of running for council and you're not sure if you're in a circumstance where there may be some pecuniary interests and you need to be cautious about, this book will help you out. And it will also help you with the language. It takes every case since 1972. This one was published in 2019. So it's relatively recent. It's not completely up to date, but it's relatively recent. I encourage you to get a copy of it. It may be at your local library. I don't know. It is in some libraries, it's not in others. It used to be, up until a couple of years ago, under $30. So it's not an expensive read. I think every member of council should have a copy of that book, quite frankly. It's important. Okay, so if you have a pecuniary interest, whether it's direct or indirect, you have to verbally declare at the meeting, But the act has changed. It now says not only do you have to declare at the meeting the way you've always had to, you have to file a written declaration with the clerk. And that written declaration and the minutes of the meeting, the portion of the minutes where you made the verbal declaration, go into what is called a registry. And that registry is available for anybody to look at. Why is that significant? Well, people may want to look to see if members of council, if they've declared a pecuniary interest on a matter, or more interestingly, if they didn't. Because if they didn't and they have the pecuniary interest, they breach the act. The act goes on to say that if you have a pecuniary interest, you can't participate or vote at the meeting. When that item comes up, you can't participate or vote. And the other thing you cannot do is influence. But the influence isn't just at the meeting. It's anytime before the meeting, during the meeting, or after the meeting. Pretty significant scope. And the act has been made clear that influence isn't trying to just influence another member of council. It also includes staff. You've got to be really cautious if you have a pecuniary interest that you're not influencing, because any one of those items missed, you breach the act, and there could be some difficulty around it. So historically, if an elector, and this act up until recently was just limited to electors within the municipality being able to bring an action against the person, historically it had to be a court action. So if someone wanted to complain, their remedy was to go to court. Pretty expensive process. Limited, I think, the number of claims that came forward. That's changed. And the act now says that a person can complain by going to the integrity commissioner. That's a lot less expensive for the individual complaining. Integrity commissioner will do an investigation, report to council, and the integrity commissioner can decide to take it to court. Court has a lot of powers. Can issue a reprimand, loss of some remuneration, or it can remove a member from council and prohibit them from running for up to 7 years. Pretty significant penalties involved with this. Not surprising, since this expanded ability of, and it's expanded not only to electors, but people beyond your municipality, has resulted in the number of complaints going way up compared to where we were just a few years ago. And at the end of the day, who pays for it all? Municipality. When I said some municipalities are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's between code of conduct violations and conflict of interest. I was at a municipality last week and they haven't spent 1 cent on investigations under the code or conflict of interest. They've trained their council members really well. People understand the consequences of it. But there aren't many in that circumstance, and we're seeing them. I have Google alerts and I get cases coming through and reports all the time, and it's astounding how many I get any given day. I want to switch topics. A couple more topics and then we're done. Confidentiality is really important. As I said, members of council carry around with them, whether it's in their head or on their device or on paper, a lot of confidential information. And it's important that members of council respect that that is confidential information and maintain that confidentiality. Don't be tempted to sit at the coffee shop, as used to happen. When, I think I'll tell my friends all the neat things that happened last night at the closed meeting that council held. Or you inadvertently might want to be talking about something that you shouldn't, or you send some documents that you shouldn't be. The expectation is that members of council will respect the confidentiality. And frankly, if you want to lose the trust of other members of council, just reveal a confidential matter. Uh, Members of council have no sympathy for that, and they get really concerned. And if you're sitting on council and you lose the trust of other members of council, you're going to have a very difficult 4 years. It's an important issue, and it's really important to keep in mind. And as it says on the slide, individual members of council, councillors do not speak on behalf of the municipality. I want to talk about water and I want to put this into context, because you're going to, at the end of this slide, you're going to be saying, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? But that's not the purpose of this. But I want you to understand that water is one example of the incredible responsibilities members of council take on. This is a highly regulated area, and we all remember Walkerton. And the provincial response to Walkerton was a piece of legislation called the Safe Drinking Water Act 2002. It was considered at the time one of the best pieces of regulatory legislation around the supply of water to communities worldwide. The province passed that. They created the Walkerton Clean Water Center, which doesn't supply water to Walkerton. It's a research facility. It's an amazing place. Province passed the act except for a section that said decision makers will be personally liable. That section didn't come into effect. Who are the decision makers in the municipality? Members of council, also senior staff and a water operator, okay? At the AMO conference, the Association Municipal Conference in 2012, in August, the province announced that section was coming into effect on January 1st, 2013. And I can tell you, as a sector, we scrambled to figure out what it meant. And I had the privilege of doing training around the province on that section. That came into effect on January 1st, and I was doing a session at the conference that Stephen is going to be speaking at tomorrow. He is chairing this panel that answers questions from hundreds of councillors around the province. It's a really cool gig. At that session, at that conference, I was one of the speakers talking about personal liability under safe drinking water. 2 weeks before that, so we're now 6 weeks into the 2013, a municipality in southwestern Ontario, charges had finally come to fruition of charges laid a number of years earlier. The chief water operator went to jail and had a serious, significant fine. And the municipality had a significant fine. That day in that room was the mayor of that municipality. And he came to me at the break and he said, do you think I could talk to the group? And I'm going, oh yeah, sure. And he did. And here was his message. He said, if that section had been in effect when these incidents occurred several years before, that it had been in effect, he had been advised by his lawyers, the lawyer for the municipality and the chief water operator, that all of council would have been charged. And they were told that by the ministry lawyers. So how do you protect yourself as a member of council? What are you supposed to do? What's the responsibility? I mean, you can't sneak out to the water treatment plant and put in a bit more chlorine and hope that that meets the test. It doesn't. But you need to know what your responsibilities are, what your duties are. You need to have some training on it. And you need to be making wise decisions for the benefit of the users of your system. If you act appropriately and based on the training that you receive and you act in a reasonable way as a counselor would act, who's had some training and knows about it, then the risk of personal liability isn't going to be there. The other thing that's important to understand is municipalities, every municipality has a number of different insurance policies. to protect not only the corporation, but members of council and staff in the circumstances. So it is in place. What though delivery of water is, and it's a health and safety issue. No one will ever have any sympathy for members of council who don't act in an appropriate way with respect to this. If you have been properly trained and if you are diligent and you're reading those reports and you're prepared to go to the meetings and you understand the issues, you're good. But that's the level, I think, of commitment you need to be thinking about when you're thinking of running for council, not just for water, but well beyond the scope of all of the issues that come before your council. It's really significant. Taking a long time, so let me just sum this up very quickly. You need to understand your role. What are you being elected to do? And as I say, that's set out in the legislation. Not only do you need to know your role, but you need to know the role of the other people within the organization. What are they there to do, and how do you work together to achieve that? Powers rest with council. By passing bylaws, you do that in an open way. You're not a manager. You are a policy maker, you're a decision maker. It's really important. Understand your personal obligations under the code of conduct, confidentiality, conflict of interest, and other areas. Finally, talk to your family. This is a huge commitment. It's great fun and it's really challenging, and it's rewarding to give back to your community, but it's got to be a commitment for the whole family. In my experience, it does. And for even thinking about running for council, I congratulate you. I think it's so important that people are and you're prepared to spend an evening talking or listening about some of the implications of this. Congratulate you for it. I encourage you to give serious thought. If you decide to run, it's a great place to be, I can tell you. And I know this organization. I've had a chance to work with them over the years on different things. This is a great place. This is a great community to be as a community, but it's also a great municipal organization. That's great stuff. So, Stephen, I've talked way too long.
Thank you so much, Fred. That's much appreciated. I'm sure there's lots of thoughts that are percolating in folks' heads, which is great. What I'm going to suggest we do is let's take a 3 to 5 minute break. So we'll come back just shortly after 20 to 8. Again, washrooms are out in the hallway if you need to go. For those of you that are tuning in online, take a moment to take a break. We'll come back here again at about 7:42, let's say. It's about 5 minutes from now, okay? And then we're happy to answer questions. We've got some questions streaming in from online, which is great. Please, those of you that are in attendance here in person, get those questions ready. We're happy to answer them. So we'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Okay, I think we're at about that spot, 42, 742. I'm going to start for everyone just in here with a couple of questions we got online. And then we can jump into any questions in person. And again, if you're tuning in online, please do continue to send in questions using the WebEx chat feature. We will get them here. We're monitoring in the back, and I'll see them come up here. So the first question is related to those endorsement signatures that I spoke about. And the question is, if someone is running in Ward 1, as an example, all endorsement signatures must be from residents in Ward 1? And the answer to that is no. They have to be resident in the municipality. So you can have a resident in Ward 2 endorse a candidate in Ward 6. So just to be clear, that's one piece. The other thing that's really important too is, and related to that is, you can run in a ward in which you do not live in. So if you live in Ward 1, you could run for as a candidate in Ward 5 in Guelph. The nuance is you won't be able to vote for yourself in that ward that you're running in. So there is maybe one less vote on the tally sheet in that sense. But endorsements are considered to be citywide matters. The next question is, and Fred, you can jump in on this one too if you'd like, is please address how Guelph is somewhat unique in that we are a single-tier municipality, as Fred noted. The big bucket of services lies with the City of Guelph that you access. So I like to think of it as sort of you wake up in the morning and you head out the door, you're bumping into a municipal service almost immediately from the time you wake up, whether it's water to brush your teeth in the morning or that walk on the sidewalk to wherever you're going, the transit you're taking, et cetera. So all those services come to us. But the question is, we're unique in the sense that we're a single tier municipality that contracts with Wellington County to administer social services, which are still technically our responsibility. So it is nuanced. And I think Fred's example of there being so many different municipalities and how they structure themselves across the province. Some regional governments, for example, in Ontario, provide transit services. York Region is a good example of that. Other upper tier municipalities, regional governments in Ontario, do not provide transit. A good example of that is Peel Region. The transit in Peel is provided by the lower tiers. In our case, social services are predominantly administered by the province or by Wellington County, but in a way we also share services with Wellington County. So land ambulance services in Guelph and the county are predominantly a Guelph service that is partially funded by the county as well. So the land ambulance, the Guelph Wellington Paramedic Services, is a line department here at the City of Guelph that provides services throughout the rest of the county. So it is a different, and I think you could probably pick a municipality, a single tier nestled within an upper tier like a London and Middlesex County across the province. You could pick an upper tier like a county level government and any of its lower tiers. And if you're picking, from the lot, you'd see different ways in which they deliver services. So it's not, I think, as Fred alluded to, it's not as clean cut as we might think for all different municipalities. So I will leave it at that and happy to answer any questions in the room. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, the question was around hydro utilities and local hydro and whether that's still a line department of the city, or what's the relationship perhaps that the city has with. Yeah. Guelph Hydro was a wholly separate entity and utility. And recently the province deregulated a lot of the hydro sector in Ontario. And so we've seen a lot of what we call local distribution corporations or local distribution companies, LDCs, have become arm's length from the municipality in a way that they weren't previously before. And in fact, a lot of those local distribution utility or companies are amalgamating. And so Guelph Hydro was amalgamated with a company called Electra. And so Electra delivers local distribution or has local distribution responsibilities within Guelph. And it's quite a large local distribution corporation that provides services in Barrie and Vaughan and Mississauga and a wide swath of sort of central southwestern Ontario. Yeah, yeah. Any other questions about elections or local government 101? Yeah, go ahead.
Are coming up. Okay. Would you be obligated at that stage of the game, or maybe mandated, shall disclose that you belong to a bicycle organization or a group, or a formal group, I'm saying, or maybe even a competitor?
The issue of membership of bodies, and that you're talking about a body in this case. There've been some cases on it, and frankly, they've gone both ways in some cases, but it's important whether you're on the executive of the body or if you're simply buying a $10 membership for the year to be part of that. It's true in skidoo clubs in the north. It's true, you know, cross-country trails and all that sort of thing. The book will give you a pretty good idea in terms of what to be looking for. The odds are very likely, and I'm not going to do any analysis here, but the odds are pretty likely that it would not be a pecuniary interest that would not affect you, and you'd be able to participate.
And
But you're right to do the research.
Just for folks online, that question was around conflict of interest, cycling clubs, that type of thing. So just want to make sure that those online can hear those questions as well. We'll work
one more point on this. When you're elected to council, one of the first things you should do is ask for an opinion from the integrity commissioner saying, I'm a member of this body. Here's my relationship to it. Here's how much I pay. I'm not on the executive, or if I am on, do I have a pecuniary interest? And you'll get a response. So that service comes available to you the minute that you take office as a member of council.
Bill came up regarding automotive emissions. Bike lanes or any of those sorts of topics or legislative agendas. That be my guess with that is that if I was still employed by an automaker, it would be
too many mics on, I think.
Maybe a pecuniary interest if we're talking about you're an employee of a company that works in the industry, particular industry, and whether if that industry issues around that industry are coming before council. I'd give you the same advice to you as I gave to the other gentleman, and that is when you're elected, ask for an opinion from the IC and get the advice so that you're on the same page. Probably the examples you gave probably wouldn't put you in that circumstance. It would, though, if your employer were to be coming to council on a particular issue.
motor bringing up.
No question about that.
Yeah, go ahead. Great question. So the question was, on our slides, we indicated that the end of the campaign period was January 3rd. That's the sort of for the financial sort of line in the sand of when you can continue to receive, or sorry, I should say when receiving contributions and incurring expenses would sort of be the end. And the question was, what's the beginning? The beginning is the day that you file a nomination paper. And really important too, one of the great questions we got online at the last session was steps that you take when you begin to file a nomination paper. So it's really important that campaigning involves, at a really simplistic sense, it involves incurring expenses, door knockers, flyers, signs, those kind of things that you'll incur through a campaign, and receiving contributions. So funds out, funds in. In that regard, a really key sort of linear way to think about it is file a nomination paper, open a campaign bank account, and then begin to incur expenses and receive contributions. You can't receive contributions or incur expenses before you filed a nomination paper because you haven't started a campaign as of yet. And that step in the middle, that intermediary of opening a campaign bank account, is very important because it's going to be a lot easier to manage the accounting of your campaign in that regard, right? Everything in, everything out, relatively easily accountable if you're doing that. And I would say even if you're contributing and you're self-funding your own campaign, it's important to open a campaign account and then transfer your own contributions into that account if self-funding is a significant part of your own campaign. Yes, go ahead.
Second one is just a ballpark of generally how much expense is by someone running for council who's successfully delivered.
Great question. So I'll repeat the first one and then I'll remember the second one and repeat that as well. The first question was around, is it, are you required to open a personal bank account or a business bank account when you establish your campaign and you sort of kick things off? I think what I'll do is I defer that to the individual candidates. What we found is that many banks and financial institutions will want to see that your nomination paper has been filed. So again, that sort of reinforces that linear path. As I said, file your nomination paper. You'll get copies of all that package. Take that into your financial institution. Let them know. One of the banks likely let them know what you're doing, that you're seeking to open an account for the purposes of running a campaign, and they'll be best to advise you. So I would just defer to them in that sense. The other thing I would say is if you know candidates that have run previously, that's a great question to ask them. Your second question was, sorry, remind me. Oh, best estimate at. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, what's the average spend for a successful candidate that we've seen? All of the campaign financial statements of previous candidates in the 2018 election are available online. And so you can go and get a really good sense, out of 8 to 10, say, candidates in a ward contest, you can get a sense of obviously who was elected and what they expended and vice versa. So I would encourage you to look at those. And that brings me to another point. The financial aspects of running a campaign can be complex. You have to file a financial statement. We call it a Form 4. It's a prescribed form under the legislation of the Municipal Elections Act. You can get that online. We will have it online as well, obviously, through guelph.ca/vote. It is available right now on the provincial website, what they call their forms repository. And you can look at that. That's a really great thing to look at now to get a sense of how you're going to be required to account for your expenses and your contributions. That's the form that if you look online at previous candidates, you'll see those forms posted. We're required to post those online. And so it gives you a really good sense of what goes into not only a successful campaign, but also how to properly account for that campaign using that form. Yeah, so the question was, are personal financial records, credit scores, that type of thing, are they public documents as a result of you filing for office and initiating a campaign? The simple answer to that is the Municipal Election Act does not require the release of any of those types of documents. What it does require is the proper filing of financial statements by prescribed deadlines. Those become public information. In a way, too, there's a list of contributors that may be included on those statements. Those become public records and public information. So if you're receiving contributions from members of the community, people that you're seeking their support from, it's really good to have maintain receipts. Think about how you're going to track those. So tracking those contributions that you receive is good for you in the sense of filing that financial statement at the end, but it's also really good for the individuals you're seeking contributions from to understand that some of that information that they're providing you, or that by nature of that contribution, some of their information will become public as well. And again, I'll point you back to those previous financial statements. You can see a list of contributors on those financial statements, and you can see what triggers that, what makes those public, so that when you're issuing receipts, you can have an honest conversation with somebody. Thank you for your contribution. I'm issuing this receipt for the funds you've contributed to my campaign, and there's some information on those. No.
I would encourage you to look at committees. Oh, the question is, wow, that's a big job being on council, and I'm not sure I'm ready for it right now. What else is there? And can I look at local boards? Absolutely. Is there an expectation of transparency? Absolutely. But you also can look at committees of council, not just local boards like libraries or whatever. Find something you're interested in, find out what the process is to get appointed to committees or to boards, and put your name in. It's a great way to get involved, and it's not nearly the level of participation that you're required to meet when you're a member of council. Good question.
And maybe I'll just add into Fred's comments, the City of Guelph has 15 to 20 plus advisory committees, which are comprised of citizen members, and they're advising council on a wide range of issues. Transit matters, accessibility advisory committee. Some of them are statutory, they're required under legislation. Heritage Guelph is a great example of that. The accessibility advisory committee is another example of that. So there's the advisory committees that advise council, which are great opportunities for community members and citizens to become involved in sort of informing council's decisions. And as Fred noted, local boards are a really good example as well. Now, some have very strict regulations in terms of how appointments are made. I think of the Guelph Police Service Board as an example. There's provincial appointees to that board, but a great example is the Guelph Public Library Board. Quite a few citizen members sit on that board, and in fact, there's only one member of council that's appointed to that board by city council. But so there's a wide range of ways in which you can become involved in the local decision making and the local democratic process. Yeah, great question. So the question was, with respect to the citizen advisory committees, how do you get more information? Guelph.ca is the best spot. What I will say is, the terms for a lot of the appointments to those advisory committees are tied with the term of office. So we're naturally coming to the end of a term of council. Again, the inaugural for this new term of council, 2022 to 2026, will be on November 15th. The Guelph City Council will make decisions in terms of the appointments to those various citizen committees. So I would keep your eyes peeled. We post in not only on online publications, Guelph Today, the Mercury Tribune, in paper formats as well, but also on guelph.ca. And so I would look for that sort of end of summer, early part of the fall. Yeah. Yeah. I'll take a stab. So the question was around if you're seeking office and if there's histories of physical violence or abuse from an individual, and how does that going to affect someone who's running as the subject of that abuse? I think it goes back to sort of what Fred alluded to in his presentation. There's a lot of personal considerations to be made when it comes to running for office. So the only person that's going to know the impact of that on a campaign is the individual who's seeking office, the individual that might become a candidate. And these are all calculations that one has to make. Fred alluded to, if you've got young children and you're seeking office, what if they see something online in social media when you've been elected? What's the impact that has on a family, a spouse, a partner, that kind of thing? This is a personal consideration as well. So all of us have individual histories, individual relationships outside of what could become a public life if you're elected. And I think we all need to consider, if you're seeking office, how those things could manifest themselves upon election. So that's very much a personal consideration and a personal contemplation that you'll probably have to make. Yeah. I don't see any other questions coming online. Any other questions in turn? Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Confidentiality to protect your liability, obviously. But if you, for some reason, didn't understand that concept and were really worried about it, but didn't go on the record for it, then you would be.
Yeah, the question is around liability in terms of water and the position that you're taking. I'll repeat what I said, and that is the importance of the training. If you're making statements at a council meeting that are part of the general debate, the public debate. There's nothing confidential about that. That's open to the world and everybody's entitled. But if you take let me just take a different example. Municipalities thinking of buying a piece of property, and members of council are aware what the municipality is prepared to pay for that property. If one of the members of council sits at a coffee shop and tells somebody else, you know, we'll pay $500,000 for that piece of property, that's a breach of confidentiality. That can cause a real problem for the municipality, because suddenly the other side knows exactly what council members and the person instructed to negotiate. So confidential information you carry around can come from different sources, and it can be, you know, from a meeting, or it can be from documents or whatever. But if it's part of a public debate and you take a position on that, I mean, in the water circumstance, if you were saying, you know, we don't need to have all these protections in place, let's get rid of these protections because they're just costing us a lot of money, and council goes along with that, council may individually, both corporately and individually, may have some difficulties around that. If you're reducing your standard below what is considered to be the reasonable standard to operate that type of system. So listen to the advice you get, pay attention to it, get the training that you have to get, not just in water, but generally speaking.
And maybe I'll add on to that too. Fred made some great references and a couple of resources. So one was the Municipal Conflict of Interest Handbook that he shared. That's something we provide to all new candidates coming in once they're elected. So by all means, avail yourself of it now if it helps you sort of make that determination about running for office. But it's a resource that we also provide to candidates upon their first, really, it'll be on the desk when your inaugural meeting occurs. So that's one piece. And then the second piece is around the training. This is in a way, in a sense, part of an orientation to running for office. But that orientation continues after the day if you're successful in being elected. So we are actively in the throes right now of planning for what that orientation will be and what it will look like for a new incoming council. Some of those things will include, as Fred alluded to, our water services team will come in and deliver a very clear and succinct presentation about what it means and the responsibilities that we collectively have under that important legislation that we have in Ontario. And I would say too, it extends, right? You'll walk into your first council planning meeting where you are the land use planning authority for the City of Guelph. That has a nuanced difference to a meeting than a regular traditional council meeting. We'll make sure that our planning staff are available to make sure that new members of council are well versed in what that means. And in a way, I liken it to sort of the different hats that you'll wear, right? I'm wearing a hat now as a land use planning authority. I'm wearing a hat as sort of a general councilor. If you're sitting on some of those local boards, they will likely also offer training. So the hat that you put on when you sit as the council representative for the Guelph Police Service Board or the Guelph Public Library Board. So we take a lot of deliberate time to think about how best to prepare incoming members of council following an election. Yeah, maybe we'll do one more question because we are getting close to the end. I don't see any further questions coming in online. So let's go last question to you. Go ahead. Great question. Can you run under a middle name or a preferred name? I'll take an example, preferred names. I'm Stephen O'Brien. A lot of folks call me Steve. You could file your nomination paper under Steve. The reality is there are some nuances, right? There's got to be some linkages to that. Many municipalities have policies that guide that. We've had sort of the ability to sort of handle those as they come in. So yes, shortened names, middle names, if that's what you traditionally go by, we would need to see ID that proves that is the ID that you have, or the name that you go by. But yes. Yeah, I mean, it's not a matter of it's really a personal preference as to what a candidate wishes to have. The name you put on that nomination paper is the name that will appear on the ballot. So that's the important piece. There's a great question that came in online, and I'll answer this one, and then maybe we'll call it wraps unless there's burning questions, because I'm mindful that we said 6 to 8 and we're past that. Happy to answer questions further if we need to. This question is really great. Are the weeks between the election and November 15th spent in training? My experience has been that sometimes candidates after an election campaign want to unplug a little bit after that campaign. You can imagine knocking on doors, interacting with potential future constituents, all of the work that goes into campaigning. And so it's probably a great time to find a way to unplug however you do that. But the short answer is yes, there's a lot of training that comes in following the election, following election day, once results have been certified, and November 15th in the inaugural. We're planning for aspects of that as we speak now. You'll, for example, get a swipe card to access City Hall as a new member of council. So we've got to make sure we provide that. There's components of onboarding, finding your way around City Hall, where to park, things to that effect. So we go on a very granular level like that, all the way up to, as Fred alluded to, higher order governance type discussions around your personal liabilities, around the legislation that impacts how municipal government works in Ontario. So yes, it can be pretty intense. It's intense in that period from election day to November 15th. And then following that, we sort of have periodic touch points into the new year, into 2023. And quite frankly, throughout the remainder of the term at natural junction points. Great question. So I'll repeat the question, Fred. You can add in if you'd like. The question was around following the election. If you're employed elsewhere, how do you sort of navigate when to notify an employer of your potential change? Again, what I'll say is it comes down to a personal decision, right? We have members of council that have had careers in various sectors, have retired and enjoy their time in retirement supporting and serving the City of Guelph as a member of council. We have current sitting members of council that are full-time employed in other sectors, other organizations, and they balance it. There's no explicit requirement, no explanation or detailed guideline about how and when that might occur for individuals. It really is a personal and individual decision to make. The City of Guelph does have a citizen advisory committee that advises council on remuneration. And so that can sometimes impact the decisions that they make in terms of retaining employment pre-election and post, if you're successful, versus following election. So. Question was, if you've got employment elsewhere and you're retaining that employment, would that come before your responsibilities as a member of council? I think the answer to that is found in what your constituents and what the community demands of you as an elected representative. So, quite frankly, they will dictate what is required or what they deem to be an appropriate amount of attention focused on your role as an elected official or not. And the test for that comes every 4 years. So that's the simplistic answer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say wrap up. And then if there's any questions in the room, we're happy to stick around. Again, for those that are tuning in online, you can certainly send questions in to us. We expect a lot of questions as we lead up into May 2nd. I'd like to thank, first of all, my team here at the City of Guelph. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes to get these things off the ground. We've talked a lot about this, virtual meetings, in-person meetings. This is a hybrid meeting, and so there is a delicate balance that comes into play in stitching an in-person with a virtual together, and the folks that I have on the team in the city clerk's office are top-notch. So kudos to them. I want to thank Fred for joining tonight and for joining at the previous session. I think he gives a really candid look at what seeking office is all about, and so we're very thankful for Fred to do that. So thank you, Fred. I cannot stress enough. Think about it, think deeply about it. Like Fred said, we are very, very fortunate to have people that come forward and want to put their name forward. They do deserve, you do, if you're considering this, even considering it, deserve a great deal of respect. And if you decide to put your name forward, there's a great deal of thanks and congratulations to you if you do decide to do that. Keep your eye on guelph.ca/vote. It's a great resource. It's the place to go to get information. We'll continue to update that and post information. And as I said earlier, we're here to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I'll say thank you and good night. Safe travels home if you're here. And if you're moving from your couch to your to your bed, then safe travels in that regard. Have a great evening and take care. Thank you so much.